In this video, we're going to go over CI, deployments, and releases for Microfrontends. This video is part 2 of a 2-part series on deploying Microfrontends. And so if you haven't seen part 1, which is about the import map deployer, I recommend going back and watching that video. That video explains a lot of the concepts and also shows the first steps to making this work. This video is simply going to pick up where that video left off and show you how do you set up a CI process for one individual microfrontend. Okay, so a little bit of review here from the first video. What we're looking at here is a full CI process for one individual microfrontend, the navbar. So that CI process, every time that you push a commit, it will do a yarn install, a yarn test, a yarn build, and then a deployment. And the deployment is, the part that we're talking about here. The deployment does a couple things. It first uploads JavaScript files to some kind of CDN or web server, and then it second will update the import map to point to those new files. Updating the import map is the part that actually affects production, and that part is what we went over in part 1 in the first video of this series, is how do you update that import map in a concurrent, safe way, and how do you do it from within a CI process. We're going to, well, I guess we didn't show how we're going to do it in a CI process in that video. We are going to show how to do that in this video. So to start off, I'm going to show what a deployment looks like for an existing microfrontend that I've previously set up, and show you, how it works when you actually push new code and deploy it. Then we're going to set it up from scratch with a new repo that will set up these pipelines and set up a deployment, and then even show that working on the live production system. Okay, so first part here, we're going to update the navbar and then watch the deployment happen and then go over how did that even work. So here is the application, the live application that we are going to deploy something new to. And I'm going to change the background color of the navbar. Here we are in the code, and I'm going to change the background color to be light orange. Oh, I guess that's not a color. Light coral looks like a color. Okay, so I have saved that change. Looks like I need to switch to the master branch. Okay, so I am going to now push this straight to master. Now, this repo is set up so that anytime you push to master, it will actually automatically deploy all the way to the live website. Most of the time you don't have it set up that way. You would have a manual step, but in this case I have set it up so that any push to master will automatically deploy to the live website. Okay, so changing color of the navbar. So when I push, what we'll notice is that back in our CI, if we go to our workflows, we're using Circle CI again here. If I go into the navbar, we should see a new build here. Yes, this blue one here. Click on it, we'll see this whole pipeline. So it's already done the yarn install, now it's doing the yarn test and the yarn build. And those shouldn't take more than a few seconds to do. There's the test. Build is running Webpack and is storing the JavaScript files as build artifacts to be later used in the deploy. And we can take a look at it real quick, I guess. Looks like it finished. So yeah, it has created a React mf navbar.js. Let's go back. Deployment. So now in the deployment, what it will do is it will upload that react.mf navbar.js file to a CDN. In this case, we're using Google Cloud Storage as the CDN. And then it will call the import map deployer that we set up in part 1. And that import map deployer will then update the live import map for our deployed environment. So, okay, it says it worked. Let's go back over here and refresh the page and see if it actually did. There it is. So this is a pretty ugly color scheme, but you can see that it actually did deploy. And let's talk about how and walk through some of the mechanics of how it actually deployed. So you'll notice here in the network tab in our looking at our app, we're downloading this importmap.json file. The importmap.json file has react.mf/navbar, and it has a full URL right here, a full URL to a navbar. Now I have over here that file loaded up in its own browser tab so that we can take a closer look at it. And notice that there is a version in each one of these in-browser modules or microfrontends. There's a version for them that is in the URL. So 444 or 555b74, ending in ef2. And so the deployment is actually just uploading the new version of React.mf navbar into Google Cloud Storage under a different folder. And then it is calling the import map deployer, telling it, please change the URL to the new version. And so we'll see in the output here in our CI output that the new version of our navbar is C1b and then ends in 3D4. So when I refresh the page, we'll notice that it is C1b 3D4. And so if you didn't catch that, what happened was I had the old version of the import map loaded in the browser tab from before we did the deployment. And then we did the deployment and I refreshed the page, and now this import map is actually pointing to a new version of the file. And so the import map itself can never be cached. It should send down a cache control header that ensures that it doesn't get cached. However, every other file can completely be cached and can be cached forever. So this is the reason to use this version in the URL. You can also use things like e-tags and such. Either way, this is about caching and performance. You want to be able to cache these JavaScript files so that your users only have to download them once in the browser and then they can just reuse them. And in order to ensure that, you're going to want to have these always cached forever, but the import map itself, this URL, never cached. So every time that the user goes to your app, they will be forced to re-download the import map. It should be a fast request, hopefully, since it's a small file hosted on a CDN. And then once you have that, then you can start downloading the rest of your modules, and those modules will all be cached and it'll be quite fast. So we'll see that here. Here we had the C1b 3D4, and that's why we got the navbar in a completely different color, is because our CI process has updated it. So this is the goal. This is where we want to get, and we're now going to transition to showing not the navbar, but a brand new module, one that doesn't have a CI process. And we're going to show that and show it in all its glory, working, going from not being live on the website at all to being completely live and usable on that website. So, okay. So I have a repo here called things. This repo has it has a single SPA application all set up on it with a Webpack config and everything. It's all ready to go except for the CI part. And so you'll notice that if we do like yarn build, it will actually create a dist directory in here. And in it, it has react.mf things.js in here. So really, we want this file, the react.mf things file, to be uploaded to Google Cloud Storage, and then we will want the import map to have a new entry in the import map called React MF things, and then have a URL that points to Google Cloud Storage to download it from. So that's our goal. Let's go through how we're going to set it up. So I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to copy paste the one from the navbar, the one that we were already seeing working. But we're going to go over what that file does, and also there's actually a whole folder of example files exactly like this that you can go look at if you're not using Circle CI or if you're not using Google Cloud Storage. You can go look and see, is there a CI file that already exists that does what I need, or at least one that's fairly close. But yeah, we're gonna copy paste this. Okay, so Circle CI, what you have to do is you have to create a folder called Circle CI. Then you have to config.yaml file in there, paste this in here. I'm going to replace any instance of navbar with things. There was only one. Okay, so let's go over this CI file a little bit. I'm not going to go over it in full detail because, like I said, you likely aren't using Circle CI or aren't using Google Cloud Storage, and so the exact specifics here might not apply to you, but some of the concepts definitely do. So this bottom part is an interesting part of the Circle CI config YAML workflows. And so what you're saying is, I want you to first do setup, the setup job, then do the build job, which requires setup, and the test job, which also requires setup. So these two run concurrently because they both have the same dependency. If we were to omit this, then build and setup would attempt to run at the same time. So it's all this requires is what determines what has to happen first. So we first do a setup. This is yarn install, yarn build, yarn test, and then deploy. So notice that, so up here we've got setup, build, test, and deploy. And we've got yarn install, yarn build, yarn lint, and now we've got deploy. And this is the one that we want to talk about. So the deploy step has to do two things. It first has to upload the new version of the React MF things.js file to Google Cloud Storage, and then it needs to call the importmap deployer, saying, hey, here is a new version of the React MF things library. Okay, so here is step 1, the highlighted part, and here is step 2. I'm even going to put a space in there so that we can see them. Okay, so a fair amount of this is specific to Google Cloud and to Circle CI, but we have to go into the directory that has our source code. Then we're assuming there's an environment variable here that has the Google credentials, which is a JSON string, and we are putting that JSON string into a file. So the way that Google Cloud Storage works is that you run a gcloud and gsutil. These are Google CLIs. We're going to be running those, but in order to actually like authenticate and be able to upload files, you have to have a file that is the JSON. And so we first put it into the file, and then we say auth activate service account with this file. Okay, so this environment variable needs to exist somewhere, but then we just put it in a file and then tell it to authenticate. Then we call gsutil.cp. So this is saying gsutil is the Google CLI for doing some GCP things. CP copy, so we're copying our local dist directory into Google Storage, bucket name. These are all environment variables. So we're saying there is a bucket in Google Cloud Storage that we're going to upload it into. And then within that bucket, we're going to have a folder. And the folder is going to be the name of our GitHub repo. And then we're going to have circle SHA-1. This is the commit hash. This is the version. So we're going to say copy everything that's inside of the dist directory locally, remotely into our Google Cloud Storage bucket with under a folder for things, and then under a commit hash as a folder. So there will be a folder called things, and there will be a folder called commit hash. Let's go look at that bucket really quick. So we have a React Microfrontends app bucket. So the name of the bucket is React Microfrontends app. You'll notice here is our import map. Here's our HTML file, but we've also got a folder for each one of our modules or microfrontends. And so we're going to be creating a new folder called things. And then if we go inside of any one of these, we'll see that there are version numbers. And then within the version numbers, that's a folder. Within that folder, we've got the files themselves. Okay. So our goal is that we create a new folder in here called things, and this code should do it. And then step 2 is actually updating the import map. So this is actually, this curl command is the only thing that matters. The echo is for debugging. It doesn't actually do anything besides that. So this curl command is calling the import map deployer, and it's a HTTP patch. And it's saying, hey, we've got a new module, and here's the URL. You can find what curl command to run in the import map deployer's README. That's what I did here. Is you'll want to patch the services, not import map. Patch services is probably a little bit better. So here, here's this big long curl command. You'll see that we send up some JSON in the request body. And then we specify which environment. So import map deployer has the concept of environment. So which environment are we deploying? And then that's it. Hope it works. Hope that it actually updates the import map. Taking a look here, we're saying the import map deployer does use HTTP authentication. So the -u, this is an environment variable for the username and the password. And then the -d, we're saying, okay, this part is sort of important to look at. So we're saying the name of our service. Service is like module or micro frontend in the terminology of import map deployer. So we're saying the name of the service is reactmf / the repo name. So reactmf / things. That's going to be the name of our module. So once it shows up in the import map, we want it to be at react-mf / things. Okay. The URL for that module is HTTPS. We've got an environment variable that is the base URL, in this case React Microfrontends app. Then the first folder is the repo name. Oops. The first folder is the repo name. So here we go. So similar to planets, there will be a things folder. And then the SHA is the version here. And then we're saying react-mf- and then the name of the repo. So reactmf things.js. So that is this file in our, when we do Webpack, it creates that file. And so we're saying, please point it to that. And the version is what makes it unique. Now the import map deployer is capable of either creating a new entry in the import map or updating an existing entry in the import map. So we won't have to worry about telling the import map deployer, hey, things is a new module, and so do something special. We actually just do the same, we do the same process when it's the first time versus all subsequent times, and it works fine. Okay, and yeah, so that's all that we're doing here. We are, this is copy pasted here. We're using another environment variable saying where is the import map deployer, what is the environment for the import map deployer, etc. -- fail to try to get it to fail when the HTTP response is not at 200. and then insecure, I believe it might be running under HTTPS. Oh, it's not. Okay, so the insecure might not be required here. Okay, and the -I like shows response headers or something like that. Okay, these environment variables, CircleCI is actually pretty good at sharing environment variables between different projects. It does so with a thing called contexts. So if we look here, at the organizational level, there's a thing called context, and I have a deploy context. Inside of that deploy context, we have all of our environment variables set here. And we can reuse these across projects. So I already know that they work because they are the same ones that are being used for the navbar and all of the other projects. We specify that we're using that context right here. So we get all the environment variables for free. Okay. So, oops, I had forgotten to commit the code from before, but we'll just commit it all together. Okay, first attempt at deploying. Okay, so before I do this, once I push, we're going to trigger the thing that triggers the deployment. But before that happens, let's talk about like how will we verify that it actually worked. So the first step will be, is there a things folder in here with files in it? The second step will be, does this, if we reload the page on this import map, will there be a new thing called Reactive things? There'll actually be another thing that we can do though. So in the browser console, we can do await system, I'll make that bigger, system.import reactmf things. This should fail because we haven't deployed it yet. Okay, it did fail. So it says unable to resolve specifier indicates, I don't even know what you're talking about with this reactmf things. That's not in your import map. I don't know what you're talking about. So, ideally, once we deploy it, we'll be able to rerun this, and it will actually not fail, it will work, and when it works, it will give us what is that microfrontend as an object, as an in-browser JavaScript module. So for example, the navbar, here it is, it's an object with bootstrap mount and unmount functions. If you use single spell, you'll be familiar with these as the lifecycle functions. So this is what we're hoping will end up, the things module will end up looking like once we deploy. Okay, so that will be how we verify it. And let's push. Okay, I did just remember I have not enabled the things repo, so I need to set up the project. So this will enable the repo within CircleCI saying, yes, please actually do CI for this repo. It's a brand new repo, so I had not set it up. Okay, start building. We'll say not yet, please do it. And here we are. So now we'll see, things shows up here as a project within our organization. You can see each team could own a few of these different ones, and they could be controlling their own deployments. We're going to go into the actual workflow and pipelines for this things repo. So this did a yarn install. We go back to our build. Build will do Webpack stuff. And test will be doing, I guess, just lint. You could also be running other tests. It just ran lint in this case. ESLint said it was fine. Our build, we're running Webpack, and it did some Webpack things. Now deploy. So moment of truth here. Let's see if it works. Okay, so it did claim it worked. If we notice here in the output, it activated the Google credentials. It uploaded the things module by copying some files into Google Cloud Storage. Then it updated the import map saying, here's the new URL for MF things. And it appeared to work. This right here is the response body from the import map deployer saying, yeah, here's your new URL. Okay. Or your new import map. So let's go one by one and verify that it actually did work. So I'm going to refresh the page here on the Google Cloud Storage bucket. There is a things directory, perfect. And here we have our commit hash as the version. And then here we have the actual file. Now if we go download this file, here it is. It is JavaScript, all minified and stuff. And so that one worked. Let's go to our import map here. If we refresh the page, it should have a new entry, Reactive map things. Here it is. It is there. So that worked as well. And it's pointing to our URL. If we go to this URL, it should be publicly accessible. Here it is. And now I'm going to refresh the page over here. We're not using the module anywhere within this page yet. I haven't set that up. That's all the single spa root config stuff. I haven't done that. I'm just doing the CI. So like we had, the navbar worked before, but the wait system import Reactive map things did not work. Now that we do it, it actually did download it. And if we go look in the network tab and search for things, we do have a network request to download that in-browser module, and when we download the in-browser module, it is coming from the URL that is in the import map. So everything here has completely worked. It did, yeah. This is usually not how smooth CI and DevOps kind of things go. So as you go through it, I imagine you'll run into a couple things along the way. Getting this file to be exactly what you want will be tricky the first time, but then you'll be able to copy paste for all subsequent times. But let's talk now a little bit about implications now that we have this in place. What does this actually mean? So the first thing is, this is truly independently deployed, and you now have the information to understand why this is independently deployed. We're only updating the one module in the import map without updating any other, and that import map is live in production, used by customers. So updating it is modifying production. And so if you have many teams, let's say you have 3 teams in this case, you could have one team owning these top 3 modules, one team owning these bottom or middle 3 modules, and then the last team owning these last 2. You can see how they can release something without waiting on any other team. So there's a new style guide that we want to push that out. And so you push it, and then it will build and deploy it all without any of the other aspects of your application having to build or deploy. And notice how fast these builds and deploys were. A yarn install and then build and test and deploy. We're talking a total of somewhere around a minute for this. Now, Circle CI happens to be pretty fast at this. Other CIs are often a bit slower, but even still, it's 3 minutes for the whole process. Compare this if you were having a monorepo or monolith. The builds there and the deployment there would be substantial. It'd be huge. And so that's one other advantage here, is that your builds and deploys are fast, which is an important aspect of microfrontends. And let's talk about some of the downsides of independent deployability really quick. So you now do have to think about which order these are deployed in when you're releasing something. And you have to think about which branch is deployed and all of that. I suggest doing chunk or master-based development so that there's only ever one branch on all of your environments, and using feature toggles to control releases. So instead of saying we're going to deploy 4 things at once, people, navbar, API, and planets all at once, ready, set, go. That's scary because you're deploying a lot of code, and also because you don't know which order they're going to be deployed in. So instead of doing that, I'd recommend having a feature toggle. Either local storage is the easiest way to do it, lowest tech, but there are feature toggle services that you can go look up. And then what you do is you can have it turn on the feature toggle for your new feature without having to deploy any codes, separating deployments from releases. And once you do that, you'll never be in a situation where you have to press 4 deploy buttons all at once and hope that they finish at the same time in order for something to be released. Those pros and cons of independent deployability are well understood and well researched. You can go look them up for backend microservices. It's exactly the same thing for microfrontends and microservices. But I thought I'd just point out here that this is like why we're doing what we're doing, is getting towards independent deployability for each one of your microfrontends. Okay, so just the very last thing to conclude here is that there are resources what these CI files should look like. So if you go to the importmap deployer GitHub and go to examples, we now have a folder for CI files for the importmap deployer itself. So this is what we went over in part 1 of the video. So here we're saying, if you're using GitLab and AWS S3, then here's a good CI file for you that works. Alternatively, if you're using Kubernetes and GitLab, here's a CI file that works for you. Now, CI for JavaScript repo shows if you're using GitLab, AWS S3, GitLab, Google Cloud Storage, Travis with DigitalOcean Spaces, all of these are examples that you can just sort of copy from. I need to add the Circle CI ones. I'll do that right after this video. But feel free to add your own pull requests with your own CI files because it can be pretty tricky setting up these CIs the first time. So having just a reference point is really helpful and will benefit the rest of the community using this. But okay, that's it with this video. I hope that you learned and enjoyed from this video. There are more resources they're currently under development. I imagine by the time that you watch this video, they will be finished. But there are resources on singlespotjs.org under the API documentation. Let me show you here. It's currently under beta. So this recommended setup, in here, we don't have the content in here yet, but by the time that many of you watch this video, you'll be able to see like CI and deployment. There will be more information here on this website, so go check that out too. Okay, thanks.